I'm gonna fly.
Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bold Books and Bones. This is part 2 of the episodes called What Do We Tell Our Daughters? In part 1, I shared with you 2 books with tons of stories about great women throughout history. Every story in these books have the potential to give guidance to young girls and women of all ages. As a psychologist, I have seen in many cases the importance of having a role model in one's life. A role model not in the sense of somebody around you that you admire and that you become dependent from, but a role model in the sense of somebody who finds her way in life, and when you look at her life story, there are things that you can identify with. And this person stimulates you to work hard and to become better in what and who you want to be. And this could be a person who is near you and still alive, or it could be a person from a time long gone. But the importance when picking a role model is to really learn about their life story. Because why are role models so important? As I mentioned in part 1 of this episode, I encountered in the kind of work that I do quite some women who are at times very insecure about themselves. Although they are good in the things they do in life, as a professional, as an artist, or as a mom. One cause of being insecure could be that you don't have role models, or that you don't have realistic role models. If you don't have realistic role models, then you might only see the shiny outside of the professional and personal success of other women. However, if one would see the real stories about these women they look up to, then they would discover that they are not alone with their moments of doubt. It seems to be a part of life. Secondly, they would see that these women have their challenges too, and that it took persistence and hard work to get where they are now. And most importantly, if you pick the right role models, then you will see from their stories that you have the possibility to find your way in life too. Therefore, sharing stories about great women is essential. And in this episode, I'd like to share with you 2 more books that just do that. The third book is called What Would Boudicca Do? The title of the book, What Would Boudicca Do, refers to a British Celtic queen who led an uprising against the Roman Empire. And the book is written by Elizabeth Foley and Beth Coates. They wrote this book because they felt fired up and empowered by the messages of the many extraordinary women that they were studying. And they created what they call a pocket guide to our heroic sisters. And that is a very cool name. And in my opinion, this is a very convincing pocket guide. The authors share portraits of 50 women from different cultures and throughout time. And they show that these particular women share common themes in their life stories. How they often had to abandon their school education to help at home. And they had to put up with a lot of haters because of who they were and what they did as being women. The authors look at women who were scientists, artists, sports heroes, medical doctors, and housewives. And what is cool about this book is that for each woman they describe, they link it with a lesson. For example, they describe the life of Rosa Parks, and the life lesson that they learned from her life is how to stand up against bullies. Or there is a story of Megan Lloyd George and stepping out of your parents' shadow. Or a lady called Neil Gwynn and being shameless. The book is an original and informative way to share short biographies of women. And again, just like the books I shared with you in the previous episode, this book is also full of stories about women that I've never heard about. Maybe this says something about me. Or the truth is that stories about great women are less frequently shared than stories about great men. One of the stories that touched me particularly in this book is the story of Fanny Smith, and the life lesson here is finding your own voice. She was born in 1834 and she was the last of the Tasmanian Aboriginals. Unfortunately, she was the last person on Earth who spoke the language of her people. In 1903, 2 years before her death, they made a sound recording of her voice while she was speaking her language. You can find this recording online. It is a sad story, but if you look at her whole life, then it is also an extraordinary story of another great woman. What I also like about What Would Boudicca Do is that the authors do not idolize these women. Instead, they describe them as flawed but fabulous. The language they use in this book is sometimes a bit rough, but I think it fits the purpose of the message that they want to bring across. So in short, I love the book and I highly recommend it. If you are a woman or a man who is in search for a great female role model, then this is, just like the previous two books, another great source for bedtime stories. The fourth book I like to recommend in these episodes about What Do We Tell Our Daughters is called Walk Through Walls by Marina Abramovic. Now this is a fascinating autobiography that is definitely not meant to read as a bedtime story, because this is a raw and honest story of a woman who through art challenges the limits of her body and her mind. To me, this is a story of a woman that becomes a totally free person because she overcomes all the limits that lie inside herself. The book is also full of humor. However, it is the kind of dark Slavic humor. So it's funny, but at times quite heavy. One of the students of Marina Abramovic is Lady Gaga, and she calls her teacher a limitless human being. And after reading the biography, I think it is a very accurate way of describing her. Now, who is Marina Abramovic? Here is another picture of her, where she's photographed by the famous Annie Leibovitz in her book Portraits 2005-2016. And she's depicted on the cover while wearing two snakes around her body. I never really knew who she was until I read her book. I remember vaguely that some years ago I heard something about performance art and that Marina Abramovic was a leading person in that domain. I also remember something about a woman running naked into walls. It sounded a bit strange to me, so I never really paid attention to it. I thought it is just a person who wants some media attention and therefore did extreme things. Now I know that I couldn't have been more wrong. After I read her biography, a very different image emerges. Via her story, we learn about a woman who grew up in Belgrade, the former Republic of Yugoslavia. She lives in a very dysfunctional family, has no freedom and is heavily dominated by her mother. As her life story progresses throughout the book, we also see the development of an art form called performance art. And I discovered that there was much more to it than I initially thought by only looking at the surface. I think what impressed me most is one of her early work as an artist called Rhythm Zero, where she as an artist stands still for 6 hours in an art gallery in Italy. Her audience were the visitors of the art gallery, and they were told that they could do whatever they wanted with her. Marina had put 72 objects on a table in front of her while she was standing still. There were nails, there were scissors, a Polaroid camera, and there was even a gun and a bullet. And the audience, so normal people who are visiting an art gallery, were free to use these objects in whatever way they wanted. What happens next is not beautiful. And to me, this art performance started to change into some kind of social experiment. I found it very intriguing how the crowd started to respond to her. What do you think happens when people get total freedom to do whatever they want with another human being? In her book, she describes every step of the performance and she describes every emotion that she had during these 6 hours. And also what happened afterwards when she was back in her hotel room. Of course, I'm not gonna tell you because I don't want to spoil this incredible story for you. On a much more positive side, throughout the book we also discover a very open-minded woman with an incredible life story. We see a kind person who helps in an unexpected way a drug dealer to change his life for the better. We see a woman with an extraordinary creativity that comes alive in the many performances that she creates. And we see a woman who has developed an extreme form of self-control and endurance. And then there is of course this beautiful and intense performance of her called The Artist is Present. She performed it in 2010 at the MoMA in the Museum of Modern Arts in New York. During this performance, she sits on a chair for 3 months and she looks in the eyes of more than 1,000 strangers that choose to sit in front of her. In total, more than 750,000 people visited the event. It is a moving performance and it got world attention because of its simplicity and its beauty. So if you are looking for a book because you want to be impressed and inspired by an extraordinary woman that lives in our times, then this book is definitely something for you. I read the book and a couple of months later I listened to it as an audiobook. And what is really nice is that the audiobook is read by Marina Abramovic herself. And to me this made the story even more intriguing. So the first 3 books that I shared with you were mainly stories about women who had to overcome the limitations of the societies that they lived in. This last book by Marina Abramovic is also about overcoming your inner fears and your self-defined limitations. I hope that the 4 books that I shared with you in the 2 episodes about what do we tell our daughter might help you if you are in need of a role model for yourself or for somebody else. Or I hope it might help you if the next time you're looking for a bedtime story for your daughters. So if you like this episode, then please subscribe and hit that bell so you stay updated on what's next on Bold Books and Bones. Thank you for watching. Bye.